So after I DNF'd The City We Became, I read Model Home by River Solomon. Initially, I gave this a 7.8, but as I thought about it, I knocked it down to a flat 7 because the book kind of pissed me off, especially in the latter half. Um, so basically, it's about these three siblings, Esri, Eve, and Emmanuel, who grew up in a haunted house. Spoiler alert, the house was not haunted. That's just kind of what they believed as children, and in certain cases, they had to continue believing that even as adults because that was a lot more comfortable than what was actually going on. So, what really bothered me about the book is that, um, so basically, they grew up in a haunted house. They had all these crazy happenings that occurred in this house. Sulfuric acid coming from the faucets, children going missing, trying to see if they could last 30 minutes in the home, waking up in various rooms in the house, disoriented, not knowing how you got to that particular room, things like that. It seemed like there was something sinister afoot. And everybody, or at least the kids, kind of found this haint that they called the woman without a face. She was the most consistent part of the haunting of this home. Each of the Maxwell Washington children end up getting away from the home as they're adults. However, they have to come back after their parents end up dying. As there is an investigation into the parents' death, it would be deemed a MUSU. So basically, at the funeral, Emmanuel cannot allow this community to think that her parents were crazy and that they would do something so sinister as the father would take out the mother and then take himself out. So she gets up on the pulpit and she tells everyone that the house was haunted. That sounds a little less than believable, but she doubles down on it, and she even goes to a national platform and tells us on a talk show where the talk show host pokes holes in the story and basically does not hide just how suspicious they are of her claims of the haunted house. But to further prove everything, Emmanuel, decides that she is going to slay the woman without a face and the various haints and ghouls that exist in the model home once and for all. Esri and Eve attempt to stop her. They find her doing like a seance circle. They start arguing, basically, like, fam, you gotta let this go. We have to leave this home behind us and we have to go. However, they do hear a noise while they're arguing and they go upstairs and find the woman without a face playing downstairs DJ in Esri's bed. It was at this point that I knew we were playing, because not only was she playing downstairs DJ, of all the things she could be doing, the smell of it, I guess, was so overpowering for Esri that they ended up throwing up all over themselves and Eve. Okay, so spoiler alert, there was no woman without a face, there was no haint, there was no ghost. The woman without a face was their next door neighbor, Lori. She was supposed to be the jovial, stereotypical neighbor who brings you cakes and fruit baskets when you move in. However, as they were the only black family on the street and the mother was not keen on vying for anybody's acceptance, the community decided that they were going to put the Maxwell Washington family through a light hazing phase. Most people were smart enough to just keep it relegated to weaponizing the HOA. Like, if the parents tried to plant their alumni flags from Howard, there was a strike from the HOA because they only allowed the little Ivies or the Ivy Leagues. When the father tried to park a white Porsche truck that had a black racer stripe around it, they had him park it in the garage because it was too ostentatious on the street or something like that. They kept it petty. They kept it nicety. So Lori, unlike the rest of the neighborhood who just used the HOA to haze the family, decides to take it a step further. One day she comes over and she finds out that the mother is asleep because the mother is always sleeping because Eve was attached to her 24/7, and of course that's very exhausting. And so whenever Eve would sleep, the mother would sleep. She takes advantage of that and she makes a copy of the woman's keys, comes back in the middle of the night, and she starts having playtime with Ezri. It is as sinister as you can think. But just in case Ezri ever decides or ever gets hip to what's happening to them and decides to tell, she starts gaslighting Ezri and making it seem like there's something wrong with Ezri instead of something being wrong with her. For example, the little boy that went missing, the mother filed a report like a good parent would, and turns out the boy didn't exist. Nobody had any record of him. No one knew who she was talking about. So now the family looks crazy. One time, Ezri was giving Emmanuel a bath, and Emmanuel's skin starts blistering and burning because there was sulfuric acid in the bath. Ezri says that it came from the faucet, when in actuality it came from what was supposed to be Epsom salt. At least that's what she was told, or that's what they were told by Lori. Turns out it was granules of the acid, and they just said that it came from the faucet because they didn't want to get in trouble. But of course, if the parents are going to a plumber saying that there's sulfuric acid coming from the faucet and that's unfounded, the whole family starts to look crazy. So once the mother became privy, or really once the mother starts seeing all of these really odd things happening, she believes that Ezri is just a little off. So she sends Emmanuel away, and they realize that the reason why the parents never left is because they never believed the house was haunted. They always thought that there was something wrong with Ezri. Turns out it was something wrong with Lori. All right, so after Lori admits to all the ways that she gaslit the family, she tells them that the mother came to her once she realized that it wasn't Ezri, but it was Lori behind all of these crazy things, and she attempted to confront Lori. But Lori basically tells her no one would ever believe you because of how I've gaslit y'all. So they have a sue pact, basically, that Lori was conveniently recording. Um, yeah. So after that, she's like, y'all better not ever tell anyone because no one will believe you. But the whole time, Emmanuel was on live while she was confessing to what she had done to the family. So now she's exposed. Whole time that Ghostbusters was going on, Elijah, who is Ezri's 13-year-old daughter, has been meeting up with this grown woman named Lily. So once they realize that Elijah is missing and they assume that she's with Lily, they go to find her and they find her too late. Um, she's already been assaulted by Lily, and Lily has taken compromising photos of her. Elijah has the proof because she stole Lily's phone. Instead of taking the phone to the police, instead of getting a little street justice, instead of alerting hotel security that there is a predator asleep upstairs, instead of doing anything effective, Ezri, who has always known that Elijah was sneaking around, or always suspected that Elijah was sneaking around and meeting people online, adults online, doesn't do anything. They don't even press charges against Lily because Elijah believes in abolition, and even people in prison don't deserve to be around someone like Lily. It is like, okay, it's one thing for a 13-year-old to have such a cut and dry thoughts about abolition, but as the adult who knows just, intimately well just how harmful it could be to allow someone in a position of power to go without consequence, as you just had someone having you believe you lived in a haunted house well into adult years, you still let this lady off scot-free in the name of abolition. And I can't help but think that when our ancestors and elders came up with the conversations about abolition, it wasn't to further insulate white women from consequences. But I digress. So once they split up all the assets that their parents left them behind, they end up moving into a big house together with all their kids. They live closer to a black neighborhood. Ezri's in therapy, and I think that Elijah is supposed to start therapy. Yeah, it just felt sanctimonious at that point when they brought up the abolition. I feel like there were some oddities about the whole final act. There's also, like, Ezri is just a very unique character. I understand why they are the way that they are. It's just there are certain things that kind of throw me off about them. There's a weird bit of intimacy with their siblings. Like, there are a few passages where they talk about how they want to lick their siblings' tears and like bathe them, and it was just a hair too much for me. But I definitely recommend reading the book. It is a very interesting book. The penultimate book that I read was The Reformatory, which was the second Tananarive Due book. I'm kind of sad. Like, Tananarive Due is a great author, but she seems to write a lot more fantasy, and I'm not really into that. I could do haints and apparitions and ghosts and stuff like that, but fantasy is it's not my thing. But this was a 10 out of 10. This book is 565 pages, and this has to be some of the best suspenseful writing that I've ever read. I will spoil this for you. There is a happy ending. The reason why is because you're going to need it to get through all 565 pages. There is a happy ending, and up until 565 pages, you have to guess if there will be a happy ending. It keeps you on your toes. So basically, it follows a young boy named Robert Stevens Jr. and his sister Gloria. They're about to walk to school when one of their neighbors, Lyle, starts leering and heckling Gloria. He tries to tell the boy to leave his sister alone. The boy pushes him, and so he kicks the boy, but the boy's father sees him. Where this gets sticky is that this isn't just some regular neighborhood kid. He is the son of one of the biggest landowners in his city. Because of that, they have a lot of clout with law enforcement, and the father insists that Robert is charged. So he ends up getting 6 months in a reformatory school, which is like a baby prison. And this particular reformatory school has quite the reputation because there was this huge fire that happened in 1920. There were like 20 or 30 people that died in that particular fire, and the place is haunted. A lot of the younger boys in the reformatory see haints, apparitions, and just all these weird happenings that prove that the place is haunted. Even adults are scared of this particular place. Where Robert is a little different than others is that he can see haints and he can hear ghosts. He can hear all of these different things vividly. The warden, I guess, the warden of that particular school is very superstitious, namely because he knows that he started that fire, and he's afraid that those ghosts and all the souls that he snatched is going to come back to haunt him. So he enlists Robert to catch Haynes in exchange for different favors. However, when Robert cannot be his one trick pony, basically, he starts doing things to antagonize Robert and harass him. What's crazy about this book is that all of the events of the book take place within like 2 weeks. I have never known a 12-year-old to go through as much stuff as Robert has gone through. My heart broke for Robert. It broke for Redbone, who is one of the boys at the reformatory that Robert ends up befriending. Like, we hit the ground running with this book. In the first day of Robert being at the reformatory, he gets jumped. He finds out that the warden killed his baby sister. He ends up being whipped in something that they call the fun house. Like, the baby is going through it the entire time, and all of this happened in the span of 2 weeks. And this is what 2 weeks look like. I can only imagine what that 6 months would have looked like. Really great book. Definitely recommend reading it. Just know that it is very heavy. It deals with children, and they are children who are not treated like children. So, and this is in 1950 rural Florida. So, yeah. So the final book that I read, a much needed palate cleanser after the reformatory, and yet another book that was more along the lines of what I was looking for when I was looking for mysteries and thrillers, is The Landlord by Brandon Massey, which features the Woodson family. It is a young black couple in Atlanta. They have one child who they are trying to give a better life to. They're also trying to get through some of their financial problems. Cam is a struggling author. He had some moderately successful novels published, but they kind of plateaued. So now he's doing freelance and gig economy. His wife is a teacher, which, as we know, teachers don't make a whole bunch of money. And then they have a daughter. Daycare is hella expensive. Coupled with the fact that they just went up on the rent at their current apartment, they're in the market for a new place, and they end up finding a too good to be true listing. It's like this 5 bedroom, 3 bathroom home, modern luxury spot. The only issue is the management company is just a little odd. There's also some really odd stuff going on at the property. Like the day that they view the property, they see the handyman Thor scrubbing blood off the walls. That wasn't a big enough deal breaker for them though, and they still sign a lease that seemed to be pretty normal. That is until they get a hand printed copy of the lease, and it seems to have been amended. This hand printed copy has some very unique rules, namely that Cam can't work in his home. He's a freelance author, but he cannot write in his home because that would be considered working from home, which is strictly against the lease, and they can be charged $1,000 for each infraction. It seems like their landlord, not landlord, the property manager, Miss Carver, is always at their home, always watching. So eventually, the landlord starts calling Cam because he finds out that Cam is a handyman. Like, that's part of some of the gigs that he does. And he starts doing jobs that are surprisingly lucrative for the landlord. He gets lulled into a false sense of hope because he's making all this money. He's finally moving up in the world. Then he gets a job that he can't do. For example, he gets a job that he can't do when Thor takes him to somebody's house to straighten out a tenant who had been dodging payment. Thor begins to rough this man up and presumably take the man out because he like tased him with this super strength taser. So now that Cam has decided to renege on this particular job, he and the landlord fall out, and the landlord starts doing things to further antagonize him. Coupled with the fact that he's also found out that at this particular landlord has had some different odd things happen at his properties. It seems like crime follows the landlord's tenants. So Cam and his family have to figure out how they are going to adjust to all of the extreme rules that are being placed on them, the leasing fraud, and everything else that's being thrown their way. Um, Really good book. I gave it a solid 8 out of 10. Um, Basically, it's a really good low stakes book. It's everything that you would expect from a suspense novel. It's not super creepy or anything that'll keep you up tonight at night. If anything, it's just more frustrating. Like, I can't imagine looking up and I see my apartment manager in my home. If anything, this book and Model Home taught me not to rent in Georgia, at least not have a landlord in Georgia, I should say. And if I buy a home, I'm not going anywhere near the HOA. Like, I can't imagine paying for a home where I'm being told what I can and can't do. And I'm definitely going to go through his catalog. He's like the black James Patterson, which I like that. You know, sometimes you need a book that's only a thriller. Sometimes you need a book that's only a mystery. God, we don't need the added racial trauma, the added. Sometimes it's okay to just be on the nose, and I appreciate that. Now, it's not to say that he's a bad author. He's a basic author. I liked his book. It was very interesting. Definitely gonna go back through his catalog. I think there's a book that I'm thinking about called The Other Brother that I want to read next from him. Um, yeah, it's a great palate cleanser, especially since this is actually the type of book that I was looking for. I ended up finding a lot of heavy reading, so it was nice to have books like this and Missing White Woman to break it up. So that's all that I read for the month of February. I hope that you guys like these books, and I hope that you guys read some of them too. If you have read them already, tell me what you thought about them. Let me know what you read in the month of February, and let me know what you're reading this month in March, even though we're like halfway through. Make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe, and have a good day. Bye.